I like to think of myself as a servant that serves in servitude. Now, what do I serve besides the fact that I've run every day this week? I serve interesting stories, fitness and interesting stories. I have actually run every day this week. I don't know. I don't know if I want to give you guys all the credit for that. I like to think of myself as something of a self-starter, but I do get bullied into running a lot. And I just wanted you to know I've run over 5 miles Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Thinking about taking today off, though. Maybe. I might end up taking today off, but it depends on when you're watching this. It might be some other time. But I'm not here to serve the running. I'm here to serve the other interesting stories. And this is the story of a player named Promise David. A player that is on the rise in European football, but he's cut from the mold of a couple of the other people that we've spent a good amount of time talking about. People like that Gambian center back on the Real Valladolid, Yan Diamande, the guy that was playing in high school in the United States and then playing Real Madrid less than a year later. And in honor of Jamie Vardy, obviously, whose career, at least at Leicester, is coming to a close, and he will be missed dearly. There is another. And obviously, Promise David is objectively a sick name. Now, you might have guessed he's got Nigerian descent, but he was born in Canada, which is, at least up until recently, not an area that would have been considered a hotbed for football. He's now 23 years old, right? But this guy has become a very important part of the team at Royal Union Saint-Gilloise. Obviously, I'm interested in him because there's a pretty wild story as to how he's gotten there. But Royal Union Saint-Gilloise right now are running. Oh, let me find the championship round here. They are running right around the top of the league in Belgium. Now, as I'm recording this, they are 0-0 with Genk, but if they beat Genk, they will still be top of the league, trying to win the league for the first time since 1935. And my boy, Promise David, has been absolutely electric in the entirety of this league season. Okay, Promise David has scored 16 goals in 28 matches. In his first season playing in any European league that could remotely be considered decent. And I don't mean offense to the Estonian league that he came from. I just feel like that's a fair sentence. Because Promise David was signed this past summer by Union Saint-Gilloise from the Estonian league. Right here. Nome Kalju. Oh, I clicked the wrong button. Sorry, my brain's not really on today. Nome Kalju of the Estonian league. Now, there's a story on OneFootball that that's written up about this, from the Estonian top flight to the Belgian Pro League. But I want to go even further than that. Okay, because this guy's from Brampton, Ontario, and he played in the Toronto FC Youth Academy until 2016. But then this guy's life decided to get crazy. First, he moved to a different team in Canada. Maybe, fell out, wasn't good enough at the Toronto FC Academy. He went to Vaughan SC. But after that, and I cannot figure this out for the life of me, right? He went to NK Trnava for 2 years in Zagreb, Croatia. In 2019, at the age of 18, he went over to Europe to play with NK Trnava just as a youth player. And after 2 years, he came back and played for FC Tulsa for a year as part of his youth academy. And if you're not familiar with the great city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, that's in the United States. So this Promise David guy, clearly, from the age of 18, was like, I'm going to try and make it as a footballer, and he jumped around to a couple of different locations. And this is a beautiful example of how fucking crazy, like, mid to low level professional football or semi-professional football can be. I've run into this, obviously, watching, not making, but watching Zealand's Hidden Grounds documentary series. Right? When you're talking about these lower level clubs, the connections and the weird moves. And the honest truth is, without talking to Promise David, we won't know why he ended up in Croatia for 2 years. During COVID, by the way. Maybe he just got stuck over there. He went over there for a trial and then just couldn't come back. That's entirely possible. Okay, and he's over there until 2021. He comes back and plays for FC Tulsa for a year. And then he finally breaks into the first team with Valletta. Okay, in Malta. This guy's from Ontario. And he was living and playing in Canada until 2019. There must have been an agent. There must have been some. He just made the decision. Promise David made the decision that he wanted to go over and play in Europe. This is actually a very common thing for kids that grow up in the United States, and I would imagine expanding that to Canada and North America is the ultimate dream, is to go play football in Europe. The problem is that I feel like there are a lot of kids like Promise David that we never hear about because they never make it out of the youth teams because they're not as good as Promise David is, as we're going to get to, as you already know, actually. Right? But they go over to Europe anyways because they're like, well, I just want to go play in Europe. And then you end up in the youth team in Croatia, or you end up in the Maltese League. And that's where Promise David ended up. It was a short-term contract of Valletta, and according to this Wikipedia thing, he scored the goal that got Valletta to the Maltese FA Trophy final, where they finished runners-up. He then transferred to Sirens. They're also in Malta, where he played 7 matches and did not score a goal, so struggled to break into the team. And at some point, somehow, he ends up getting a move from these two, 16 total appearances in 2 years in Malta to the Estonian League. Now, Estonia is part of the Baltic states, and if the Baltic states have something in common, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, none of them are particularly good at football. They're small countries. They don't have big football leagues. And honestly, particularly in Lithuania and Latvia, they'd rather be playing basketball. So the Estonian League is not a league that is, I play Football Manager all the time, right? I track European competitions from the first qualifying round. I could not, before I heard of Promise David, I could not have given you the name of a single team in the Estonian League because they don't even think about making a run. Even teams from Latvia. We had a team from Latvia make a group stage this year. Estonian teams are on a completely different level from that. They're playing in like the preliminary qualifying round and losing to teams from Malta. Maybe that's how they ended up finding Promise David. But he goes to Estonia, and apparently they're not expecting much from him. That's where we can kind of pick up with this story, right? I just needed you to understand how kind of weird and crazy the trajectory of this guy was, right? But the article says David was not signed for the Call You first team. He spent his first season with the side's second team, which play in the third tier of Estonian football. He's in the third tier of Estonian football at the age of 21. Okay, he scored 22 goals in 19 games, which leads to him getting called up to the first team. And then he pops up in the first team and scores 14 goals in 16 games. Apparently, they actually believed in him. Here's somebody, at least quoted somebody from the Estonian football podcast as saying, you could see he had talent, but it was raw. Then they drop an all-time bar. We always said if he had a brain, he'd be world class. Look, that is the most backhanded compliment I've ever heard. We always said if he had a brain, he'd be world class, saying that this dude basically had the technical and physical skills to be amazing. He just couldn't put it together between the ears. But you just called this guy so dumb. When I was reading this article, because I knew I wanted to make a video about this, I came across this quote, and I almost debated even talking about it because it's such an off-the-chain thing to say. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of people understand what they mean by this, right? In the sense that we've all seen people that have all the physical and technical skill in the world, and they just need to find a way to put it together. And guess what? He put it together. In his second season, we actually had him as a player to watch and predicted him for top scorer. So it wasn't surprising when teams came in for him in the summer, and he was brilliant. And then on his way to top scorer honors, and then Union Saint-Gilloise was the team that kind of swooped in and signed him. But that completes what was essentially a meteoric rise for this kid. And we're talking about a guy that 2 years ago was playing in the Estonian third division after having gone on one of the weirdest career odysseys, just chasing the glory of being a professional footballer. And now he's with Union Saint-Gilloise, and he is literally the featured striker on this team in 1 year. The more and more I uncover stories like this, the more that I am convinced that the scouting infrastructure in the world of football is just not very good. There are only two explanations for this. That scouts are not nearly as good as they think they are, and they're kind of going off of conjecture and pre-proven trajectories than being able to go to Estonia and go, wow, this guy is great. And then obviously there are a few clubs like Brighton, like Union Saint-Gilloise, who do a really good job of signing players like this. This is the only instance where Union Saint-Gilloise has popped up as, oh, look at them go. they made this great signing. That, or there are really just a lot of players out there that could be great if they were put in the right situation. And Promise David has all of a sudden been put in the right situation. He some switch gets flipped. He dominates with 14 goals in 16 matches in Estonia and then goes to Belgium, which, I mean, the gap between those two leagues is the Marianas Trench, the Pacific Ocean wide between the Belgian league and the Estonian league, and he just doesn't miss a beat. The tactic works out perfectly. Everybody's really friendly with him. He's incredibly happy and having a good time, and he just goes out there and crushes. What was the point? I wanted you to be aware of Promise David. Also, he did have the option to play for Nigeria, but he's declared for Canada. So now if this guy continues on this trajectory, becomes a top 5 league striker, they now have more than Jonathan David to offer as a striker. And his name is Promise David. I mean, come on.